Welcome all to the March meeting of TDOST. Thank you all very much for attending. First item of business is apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair. Apologies received from Councillor O'Nines, Councillor Clements, Councillor Coonar, Councillor Dermot Singh Sohal, and we have Councillor Luke Davis joining us on Teams today.
Okay, thank you. Any other apologies? No. Okay. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does anyone need to declare any declarations of interest not previously declared? No. Item 3 then, Chair's remarks. I only have one, and that's to congratulate Councillor Zaka Chowdhury, as he is going to become, or he is the Lord Mayor-elect of Birmingham City Council. And I suspect this will mean you will be leaving the committee.
Yes.
To take up your duties as Lord Mayor, but congratulations nonetheless. So well done, Zaka. I don't have any further remarks. So item 4 minutes, both if we do in terms of factual accuracy, the 12th of January. Anyone like to make any comments? Carol?
Right, so if you go to 4.2.
Yes.
Capital Transport Performance Report, December 25.
Yes. On page 5.
And it's on page 5.
Yes.
There's, the second paragraph, Councillor Carol Hyatt reported that Wolverhampton's Transport Lead had raised concerns that the council was still awaiting resolution of grant agreements. She noted that over a year earlier, now that's wrong, 2 years ago, Wolverhampton officers had advised that the agreements were not being progressed quick enough. And what I said was that when our cycling ambassador, Becky, was appointed, one of the first things she did was to take the team to Greater Manchester so that they could just copy the way that they do their grant agreements. So 2 years ago, I flagged it up with an officer present, my Meg. And 1 year ago, Becky flagged it up as one of the first things that she did when she was our cycling ambassador. And the point, and it is still not changed. It is still not improved. And I really believe, because this is typical of our minutes really, that we can't improve by minimising things that are wrong, by not responding to criticism, because progress doesn't happen by staying the same.
Okay. I'm going to take that as a matter arising rather than the factual accuracy.
It is the factual accuracy. It's factually incorrect. And it needs to be said, because it is factually incorrect. These aren't minutes, but per se, these are a record of what took place. And that is factually inaccurate. And I want to flag it up because sometimes the rate of change is glacial in the Combined Authority. And sometimes the rate of change needs to improve. And this is a point where it really, really needed to improve. When Roseville came and they said about the systems and that, I wanted to say, no shit, Sherlock. I want to say that about the report that's happened, because even I can see it, that things don't always respond to reflect the needs of our local authorities. You know, don't make it easier. And 2 years ago, I was saying your grant funding's taking too long. It's delaying the projects by 12 months. It's making it harder for local authorities to deliver. And nothing happened. So my voice didn't count. My office's voice didn't count. And then Becky came in. And what was the very first thing that she said? It's taking too long to hand over the money to sort out your grant funding. You took them to Greater Manchester. It was best practice. And we could have copied theirs. We could have just lifted it straight out and done that. And we haven't. And I think that's a point worth making, because I care about the Combined Authority. And in Wolverhampton, we don't stop still. In Wolverhampton, we're always progressing. We take the criticism on the chin, we listen to it, and we think, how can we improve? And I don't see that here. What I've seen is 2 years where nobody's listened. 2 years where no change has taken place. Now, I might not be a councillor next year, but I really want to make the points, because it's factually inaccurate. And that happens so often when there's criticisms made.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hyatt. We also discussed this point in our group meeting, and before I ask Sandeep to come in and comment, we would entirely agree with you. The delay in capital transport projects in the West Midlands, you know, something needs to be done, and we've identified the single assurance framework as being a major blocker, because at the end of the day, if there's delay, if there's dither, if they don't progress, that only adds to the cost of any of these projects, as well as the projects not getting done. The cost of ultimately delivering the project actually goes up in the interim. So,
and it's not necessarily the single assurance agreements. It's not necessarily that process. It's the physical process of how many people are in the legal department drawing it up, how long they take. The fact that they were individualising every grant application at the beginning, and instead of having a standard form, everyone was individualised, which took a lot of time and to and fro because they had to get it right. And there weren't enough people in the legal department. You know, it's bricks and mortar was what was wrong.
So I'm going to pass over to Sandeep.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Carol Hyatt. There are a number of issues here that, you know, I will hold my hand up and say, absolutely. There's been issues with either end of the single assurance framework in terms of getting things in and then things coming out the back end in terms of legal agreements. And we have tried to put a series of measures in to help that, i.e. legal agreements should be drafted as soon as something goes into the system, not at the back end of it. We're working on a boilerplate template around legal agreements, have something that is standardized. Again, we've had some issues in the legal team, which has led to delays in getting that implemented. But I absolutely hear your concerns. But what it would be not right of me to also flag the issues that we've had the other way in terms of quality of submissions that have come in from local authorities, but also when we've challenged or been challenged on legal agreements where they have been actually held up in some cases. I'm not saying this is specific to Wolverhampton, I'm talking about generally, that they have largely been sat also within local authorities for a fair amount of time.
Can I say, this gives me an opportunity to correct something, because I've just sent an email off. Now, hold on, I need to get this email, because Wolverhampton was name checked at audit and risk on their last paper. And in name checking, my mouse doesn't work. Yes, it is. Come on, mouse. In name checking Wolverhampton, a gross injustice was done because of the right. I asked my head of transport, thank you for reaching out. The majority of the noted projects related to Black Country transport development, and other than the A4123, which will have some delivery in Wolverhampton, the A449 is the only specific City of Wolverhampton scheme. And yet we were name checked as not delivering as a council. So I'll read that again. The A449 is the only specific City of Wolverhampton scheme. So we only had one scheme, and the rest were Black Country Transport, and yet we were name checked on it. And the Black Country Transport is a combination, because I was at the meeting, at a workshop with them just on Friday. Sandwell, you know, it is a number of local authorities.
The 4 Black Country authorities.
It is all of them, and yet only one authority, Wolverhampton, had been name checked. So I think that yes, there is a need for support for local authorities to deliver what you want. I said that during my last MEG. I think the team needs to be bigger, like in Greater Manchester, in educating local authorities what you need, but in supporting them to deliver, because our teams are overstretched and very small. And just like happens in Greater Manchester, and you know the response that I got from Elliot, I think it was, we don't need our teams to be bigger. Emma Crowton, oh, we've already trained up the local authorities. Well, if you've already trained up your local authorities, it would, you would be getting what you delivered. There is a need, I think, for you to deep dive and unpack exactly what that means.
I have, and I would be more than happy, Councillor Hyatt, to sit down with you separately and take you through that, because there's an awful lot to unpack here. One thing that we can't get away from, and this is no different to any other local authority up and down the country or any other combined authority, is around capacity and capability to deliver. And that is a long-standing issue. We recognise that. It's about how do we help support build full capacity within the local authorities, because there is a deficiency there in terms of some of those core skills. But I can take you through some of the learnings that we've gone through in a series of reviews recently, and where we can actually start to make a difference.
Great stuff. Yes, please.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that.
That's brilliant.
I don't want to delay the minutes any further, but I think if you extend that invitation to other members, because I know, for example, Councillor Stanley has had concerns which he's raised in this committee about Burntree Island, and and he's spoken at length about all the issues about Burntree Island, and taking your point about capability and capacity, it's not just Wolverhampton, it's across the whole of the combined authority area.
It's across the system.
It's
That's
across
what
the
I was
system.
saying.
Yes. I don't know if legal wanted to say anything at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I'm happy to pick any specifics and go back and ensure that if there's anything matter specific or project specific that's outstanding and needs to be unlocked, then I'll make sure that's definitely goes. Obviously, I'll also link in with Sandeep as the case may be, if anything arises on the back of the conversations that take place, equally to pick up that issue. It should be said, the funding agreements as template documents, be it trust, be it active travel, be it whatever, are in the main front end boilerplate documentation. They are in standard form, de facto, and have been in situ for several years. So there shouldn't be necessarily toing and froing in relation to that and those issues. A lot of the information tends to be populated to be project specific. Now, I personally have experienced the document. I'm aware of some of the documents we're talking about, and they are, in truth, there's nothing untoward or unusual. There may sometimes be specifics project related, whereby there's a condition that attaches to that project, i.e. activity one or condition precedent, as we call it, needs to take place. But again, they're not necessarily unduly complex. They can be dealt with as necessary. We're all legals, lawyers or solicitors in the team, or necessary assistants, the case may be. They can be picked up, but they are dealt with by solicitors anyway. But like I say, the point being, anything specific that arises, do let me know, and we'll make sure that that is picked up, and if necessary feedback needs to take place, that will take place.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on to the minutes of the 20th of January now. In terms of factual accuracy, anything arising from those minutes? I'm not seeing anything. So if we then move on to any matters arising, other than the one we've already raised, and also taking in item agenda 5, the recommendations and the action tracker. I think one point from the action tracker raised in my group meeting was, in January, we discussed the Wednesbury Metro depot. And the member engagement team were going to sort out a member site visit for Dudley and Sandwell members. So this dates from the 12th of January. It's disappointing that we haven't managed to arrange that in the 2 months since then. So if you could take that back, please, because members are otherwise engaged at the moment. So I suspect getting a date in before the local elections, especially with the pre-election period, is now going to be very problematic. But, you know, the member engagement team have had 2 months to do it.
I will take that away. I'm also very conscious that with significant amount of works underway to get Wednesbury Brierley Hill moving towards testing and commissioning and into entry into service.
Yeah,
that has probably been a barrier as well in trying to find time, because as soon as we have public visits, it does mean that certain works cannot not happen. And there is a big health and safety angle, which has been a contributing factor. But let me pick that up with the team.
Okay.
Just a point of what the office has just made there. To be perfectly truthful, this is a visit to Great Western Street, not the whole of the track that you're referring to. It's just a visit there to see the simulator that you've got driving the trains and give us some idea, you know what I mean, of what it's all about. So it's not, it's just a half a day visit to Great Western Street to the depot, just to explain to what is going on.
Sure.
And are we coping with the driver training ready for when the scheme comes into fruition?
Well, and again, and on that point, whilst it may not be around the direct building, the team, all of the team are completely committed at the moment in meeting the entry into service dates. But like I said, I will take that away and see if we can accommodate.
Okay. Anything else from the recommendations or action trackers in terms of an update either officers or members would like to raise? No? Okay. In which case, then we move on to Matt MacDonald, who is the West Midlands Road Safety Commissioner, who I believe is going to do a verbal report on the road safety strategy. Matt.
Oh, good morning. Thank you very much for having me. I had some slides. Is it okay if I share them?
Please do.
Could you tell me how long I have for this as well, please? Just
20 minutes.
Okay, that's great. Thanks.
Sorry, Matt. I think members would obviously want to ask questions afterwards.
Sure. Okay, I'll try and wrap up in 15 then. So I had as my brief for this presentation 2 things, in fact. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Sorry, to introduce myself, my name's Matt. I'm the Road Safety Commissioner for the West Mids, for those I haven't met yet. The 2 things that I had to present to today were an update on KSI data for the region, because I think there were some specific questions arising over the overrepresentation of pedestrians in the KSI data to the end of year 2025 that warranted some further workup. And in addition to that, as Councillor Huxtable's just said, I'm going to give a brief overview of where we are with the National Road Safety Strategy as well. So in terms of our confirmed casualty statistics, we did share these with TDOSC in advance of the meeting. However, I just want to emphasise that they have actually been amended more recently than the last data that we have shared. The number of pedestrian fatalities for 2025 was initially 24 in total. That has now come down to 21. There is some prospect that number on further amendment may come down to 20 altogether. So these numbers have been refined by the police since the last data that we shared. However, they do represent a completely unacceptable proportion of pedestrian fatalities amongst the mix of those killed and seriously injured on our road network. And obviously, it bears remembering that behind each of these numbers is an avoidable tragedy which has torn apart the lives of the family, friends and communities of those around the individual affected. Nationally, the average for pedestrian fatalities as a proportion of KSIs sits around 25%. So we can see that in 2022 we were at or near that, but in the last 2 years that number has risen significantly. With the new data, and if the number turns from 21 to 22, the figures for 2024 and 2025 will be comparable. However, they still remain unacceptably high. It's worth looking at these numbers in their raw form as well to appreciate that, given that the overall number of fatalities on the roads is relatively small compared to the national figures, that even a slight increase or decrease in numbers can obviously have quite a big effect on the percentages. So there is quite a lot of room within these figures for statistical flux and regression to a mean, which means we must be cautious in overinterpreting both the good and the bad that come out of it. We can see in the box in the top right-hand corner that our fatalities have reduced since 2022. So that's been about just over a quarter of the number of fatalities has reduced from 2022 to 2025. 2022 was a particular nadir in these figures. And again, thinking of that regression to the mean, we must be cautious to not overinterpret this as a trend that is going to continue without us doing extra things to make sure that we are properly protecting people as they travel. Looking at the statistics, excuse me, broken down by region, we can see again there is a mixed bag. The coloured bar graph on the top left-hand corner denotes year-by-year progress in terms of killed and seriously injured statistics. There's been some good progress in Birmingham, for instance, quite a significant drop in KSIs from 556 to 500 between 24 and 25. Other areas have had more mixed results, as we can see in the sort of breakdown that's written in the top right-hand corner there. The bottom right-hand corner is the graph of where we are against where we need to be. So the West Midlands Combined Authority has a target of reducing the number of those killed or seriously injured on our road network by 50% by 2030. The orange line is where we need to be in order to achieve that target, and the blue line is where we are. So as we can see, we are not where we need to be, and further efforts need to be made in order to get us back on track to achieve that essential target. In terms of deeper dive into what is the underpinning cause of the spike in pedestrian casualties, we have taken a look at the key route network using data going back to 2021. These figures go up as far as 2024, so this is the first year that we've had that spike in pedestrian deaths, but they don't include data from 2025 yet. This is in collaboration with the use of the crash data, which we receive from local authorities and via the police. Currently, unfortunately, that data set is on hold pending a legal agreement from the police, which is currently sat with their legal department. We are awaiting updates on when we will be in receipt of this data for the 2025 figures. But what we're doing here is taking a look at the key route network specifically, over which we regionally have a particular interest. And what we're doing is splitting up the data around killed and seriously injured clusters of two or more pedestrians, and attaching that to proximity to pedestrian crossings. This is an attempt to see whether there is any correlation between crossings themselves, pedestrian desire lines, absence of crossings, or the adequacy of crossings that are in place in those locations. As I'm sure you can appreciate, fully assessing that will take a lot more of a deep dive once we are back online with Crash. This histogram shows essentially the same data represented differently, and it shows that about a quarter of our pedestrian casualties are taking place within 50 metres of a pedestrian crossing. I just want to emphasise again that this is data from the KRN rather than all of the pedestrian deaths that have occurred across the region. However, it bears remembering that the KRN, although it only constitutes 8% of our road network, is also host to over 50% of the region's journeys. Pedestrian clusters were identified in 20 spots across the KRN, and as I said, that data was analysed for the past 4 years. 3/4 of these clusters are in Birmingham, so that is a slight overrepresentation of Birmingham. These figures, as we know, Birmingham is somewhere between a third and a half of our population overall. Dudley did not have any such clusters, and we are further analysing this data in terms of the proximity of these clusters to particular desirable locations, points of interest, such as schools and colleges, train stations, and places of worship. We are looking forward to being back online with Crash so we can continue this work and try to find any patterns that are arising in terms of the location or cause of these pedestrian fatalities, because obviously if there are commonalities to these trends, then it gives us an additional focus for work to tackle them. What we do know is that 90% of the pedestrian fatalities were caused by motorists driving cars, and that there seems to be a overrepresentation of speed as a causative factor in these collisions. So what we need to do next in terms of all of this is our deeper dive into that data. So looking at location, looking at the factors which might have been underpinning these collisions. It bears thinking about that on the larger road networks, average speed enforcement is a particularly useful tool. So we know that our average speed enforcement assets reduce personal injury collisions by 39% where they're installed. However, that approach to enforcement and camera operation is often not particularly applicable to some of the smaller roads where many of these collisions will be taking place. And so a different approach is required to tackle some of these crashes. Two of the things that we really should improve on are driver education and also road infrastructure. The fatal collision review panels, which were set up in 24, have assessed a few different collisions of fairly extreme severity to look at whether there are infrastructural causes that underpin them and whether common themes can be teased out from this. It's a really, really useful exercise, and I think this will also help contribute to the picture that we're developing in terms of better understanding the risks that pedestrians face as they get about day to day. Obviously, we're all pedestrians as soon as we leave the house. So whatever other means of transport you are using, protecting the safety of pedestrians, who are the most vulnerable of all the road user groups on our network, is absolutely vital and benefits everyone. We've also obviously engaged in proactive testing of different infrastructural interventions. So the projects we did in conjunction with partners at Coventry and Viva City on Grange Road showed that by narrowing a junction mouth and installing a pedestrian refuge, we were able to reduce near misses by 89%. There weren't any active collisions at that site, but the use of the AI technology allowed us to interpret the data without anyone having to get hurt or killed before we intervened. So this is a key way that we can employ new technologies to mitigate against these disasters before anyone suffers as a consequence of our historic failure to do so. We are also developing, in partnership with the Agilicis, a regional speed management protocol, and that's in keeping with the Regional Road Safety Action Plan. We are taking a deep dive with them into the impact of 20-mile-an-hour speed limits across the region. There's obviously abundant evidence from Wales and from London and from internationally that 20 miles an hour is the right speed limit for the areas where people and vehicles are in close proximity. It's an approach that was endorsed by all 3 emergency services in Wales, and it's an approach that's endorsed by the World Health Organization from public health perspective as well. But we want to have a really close look at what that does in our region, the benefits it brings, and to see what that data is showing us in terms of how we can roll that out more effectively. Incorporating healthy streets into our roads is a longer term objective that will obviously take is a much more involved process than necessarily putting up speed cameras or enforcement and so on. But what Healthy Streets does is it not only deters speeding by changing the layout of the roads and making safer driver habits more natural for those behind the wheel, it also creates a streetscape where people are more likely to walk or to take journeys outside of a vehicle that will reduce the number of journeys that are taken by car, and therefore reduce the risk that people outside of vehicles are facing as the number of vehicles that they share that space with dwindles. We also need to have a look at junctions and crossings more generally, because these are locations which are often the source of crashes and of conflict and of danger on the roads, and work towards developing some regional guidance and a auditable standard for crossings and junctions against which our existing infrastructure can be judged and therefore improved to start tackling some of those deaths. I'm going to move on to the road safety strategy now, unless you wanted to split this into 2 and do questions separately, or
no, I think we stopped there and did questions, because I certainly have questions on this.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, no, other councillors in the room do. So
Sure.
I'm going to start off with Councillor Hyatt, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Auden.
Sure.
Right, yeah, then I've got 2 questions.
Yeah.
How far is it that at local authority level our safety safety teams are so small and have so little funding that they're forced to be reactive rather than proactive in their approach to road safety. Does that, is that being reflected in the fatality rate on our roads? And the other thing is that school streets are really, really good at reducing the number of accidents that occur due to poor parking by schools.
Yeah.
You speak to any councillor and that'll be what their email postbag will be full of. Complaints about parents parking on the pavement, parking too close to schools, too close to junctions, on double yellow lines, on zigzags. I could continue for at least 20 minutes because we've all been there as councillors. I've spent just lately, it's 3 mornings every week beside local schools. And school streets, will there be funding for school streets, do you think, as part of your Healthy Streets approach to road design?
So just to take your questions one at a time, by the first one, what I understood was you were asking is there a sort of direct correlation between the size of a local authority's road safety team and these data? Is that what you're asking?
Because funding's limited and the size of the teams are very small. And I've noticed in our team, they are reactive rather than proactive in their approach to safety, not through choice, but because when a child is being killed, you want to make sure it can't happen again. So there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
But it means that you can't then be proactive in preventing.
Yeah. Okay. So with limited resource, you have to prioritise the areas where the truly awful things have happened. I think both points I would completely agree with, and I don't think there is enough resourcing for this, and I think we need to resource it more, because what we need to appreciate is that our network is failing. When adults in machines kill children violently in public spaces, there is something wrong with the system that permits that to happen. And we can't carry on a business as usual, just maintaining our existing assets without having thought about how we improve them as well. That's something that I really want to focus on in terms of what we're doing around 20 miles an hour, in terms of what I'd like to do around junctions and crossings, by way of creating accessible guidance for what we should expect to see on our roads, what is consistent with safety, and using new data tools like the IRAP, which we're hoping to get funding for next year, to better understand where those danger hotspots are, and perhaps introduce a further element of proactivity, which we're seeing alongside the likes of the Viva City AI tech that we're starting to roll out as well. But bottom line, you're absolutely correct. None of this can happen without material resourcing, and that's something that we are in conversation about at the moment, and I will be pitching for going forward, to have money that is specifically allocated to improving stuff rather than keeping it just the way it is, because currently it's not good enough. With respect to school streets, I also completely agree. So in terms of healthy streets, healthy streets has been adopted by Birmingham in their road harm reduction plan in terms of what they are doing, how they're training their engineers and so forth. We are trying to introduce elements of healthy streets training at the CA as well, in terms of the design review panel process, and various other bits of officer training. So some of the CA officers, I believe, have been to the courses that Birmingham have been putting on for their officers and their engineers as part of their kind of Healthy Streets package they've been putting on. Where Healthy Streets really feeds into what me and Becky are prioritising is in our Kids Streets programme, and Kids Streets is essentially an embellishment of the school streets model that wants to see not just temporary changes to the streets outside schools, but full-scale infrastructural changes that, where possible, make the streets outside schools people-first spaces that can be co-designed with children and by children, and combined with packages of measures that target safety hotspots in the community, to make people's journeys more pleasant and to encourage more sustainable travel choices by parents taking their kids to school. We know that the school run comprises around 25% of congestion in the mornings. So this will have enormous benefit if we can target schools and work with them and work with children to really create that kind of behaviour change shift. Then we will have a really considerable impact on car use, car dominance, and also just the functionality of the network more generally by tackling that congestion. So that is a really, really big area of focus for us. If you had to summarise our priorities in one sentence, me and Becky think that the streets of our region should be safe for children to walk, wheel and cycle. It seems like a fairly entry-level assertion, but it is far from the truth on the ground, and we need to work harder to make that happen.
You have a supplementary, Councillor Hyde.
Yeah, that's absolutely excellent to hear. It's absolutely superb, and it reflects my lived experience as a mum of 5, as a councillor, you know, as a school governor, primary and secondary. It's just superb. But I wanted to ask, 20 is plenty in residential areas. People come out of a 20 is plenty zone and carry on driving more slowly. Is that second now to Kidd Streets, or is it part of the whole that you're aiming?
So for me, 20 miles an hour where people and vehicles are in close proximity is a no-brainer. It is, since I got my foot in the door, one of the first calls I made in my role was to 20's Plenty to say, how do we get more of this? The work we're doing with Agilicis, I'm hoping will feed into that, and Darren Duval is very owed a great deal of credit for setting that in motion and adding to our evidence-based understanding of how speed limits function in the West Midlands. We are hoping in the next couple of months to have their reports, and we will be presenting it in detail at the Road Safety Conference, which we're hosting in the region this June as well. It's an evidence-based policy. It's politically difficult. I'm sure we all realise that. But the more we can make this about evidence, and the more we can make this about objectivity and expertise, and less about political choices, the easier these changes will be to make. I think the more consistently we have 20 miles an hour as an expected limit, where people and vehicles are in close proximity, the more that will affect how people behave. And I genuinely think it will shift the culture of how people drive. It has done in Wales. There's ample evidence that it has done in Wales. And since its inception in Wales at a cost of £32 million for an entire country, it has more than saved that money in terms of collision costs. And there are 100 people now walking, talking and breathing who would not have otherwise had that change not taken place. So the impact of it cannot be overstated. It's a shame, and I'll probably come onto this a bit in the road safety strategy if I have enough time, but it's a shame that, government did not include this in their road safety strategy. I can understand why, but there is a huge amount of evidence for it. We can contribute to that evidence in a regional specific way. We can offer our own regional guidance on it. And as I said, I'm going to be having conversations about how we resource these improvements going forward. 20 miles an hour would be one thing that I think that money would be very well spent on.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor,
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation so far, Matthew. I wanted to pick up the issue about the sort of causes behind those deaths. So we know in Birmingham and indeed the West Midlands as a whole, we have an issue with uninsured and unlicensed drivers.
Yeah.
I just wonder if you've got some data around how many of those very tragic deaths were linked to the driver not being either licensed or insured.
That's a really, really good consideration. Unless Darren is going to correct me, which is often the case, I don't believe that we have that data as yet. But as we dive deeper into it, we will certainly be looking at that as one of a number of contributory factors. I think, as with any error, there are always going to be multiple factors. It's always that kind of Swiss cheese model of all the holes aligning, so you can see right through it. And we know that speed is a really, really big one, and speed is probably underreported. Uninsured driving, as you've said, is a massive problem. It will be interesting to see to what extent that has been specifically involved in this uptick of pedestrian deaths. I think it is also worth reflecting on the fact that the numbers are so small that deriving these signals from them is always going to be difficult, and you know, there will have to be a certain amount of kind of inference from the data, but we do need to seek out these signals to see what exists. If there are really strong signals, then we need to look at that further. But I think your recommendation is a very solid one, and we will take that forward.
Sorry,
I was just going to say thank you, and if we can pressure the police if it's them we need the data from, because I do think it's worth more investigation now.
Yeah, we are waiting for that crash data still. That is sat with them, but yeah, we will follow that up with them.
Darren, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just very quickly. The contributory factor data that we've had previously, there's a lot of gaps in it. So quite rightly, and as you're alluding to as well, we have challenged the police to start analysing the collision data in relation to criminality, which will include uninsured driving and so on. So we've asked them to deliver that. We'll wait to see that data, and obviously we're trying to resolve the discrepancy issue, but we'll be pushing forward for that too.
Chair, can I just ask that when they get that data, we can perhaps come back and have a look at today? Thank you.
I'm going to ask a question, and then Councillor Kate, I think, is the last one who's indicated. Matt, you said 75% of the clusters are in Birmingham, which is really concerning as a Birmingham City Councillor, especially, and just to give you a fact, 39% of the West Midlands Combined Authority area population is from Birmingham. So, because we 39% of the transport levy to transport for West Midlands. So, 75% of clusters, 39% of the population. But you talked also in your presentation about the ASE rollout. I was told that one of the new 6 ASE rollouts in Birmingham is in my ward, and it would be installed before Christmas. Unfortunately, I didn't ask which Christmas. That's a rookie error. Because over 2 months on since Christmas 25, I'm still waiting for the ASE cameras to be installed along the Stratford Road where we first met. And have subsequently met. Do you have any update on the rollout of all 6 cameras and again their glacial pace?
I'm afraid I don't specifically. I'm very happy to follow that up with you. I know because I talked to Mel Jones, the head of transport, quite frequently on that. I know that there was the ambition to do 6, and initially we were told that 4 would be done by the end of the year. I'm not sure exactly where the block is. There's obviously been some sort of procedural block, some sort of snag that's occurred in that procurement process. It may well be that there's someone sat around the table who knows more than me about that. I'm very, very happy to follow that up and get back to you, though.
Because one of these clusters, I suspect, is in that section of the Stratford Road.
Stratford Road, yeah. It's a very dangerous road, yeah.
Very, very dangerous, where the ASE rollout was going to be. So if you say there's a 39% reduction in injury collisions once an ASE camera is installed, then we need to actually get on and install them and stop announcing they're going to be installed and actually physically get on and install them. But
I couldn't agree more. You know, Birmingham have obviously done a great job. But they have rolled out one of these. They haven't met the target for the end of the year, but in terms of process, how that's happened, I couldn't give you the detail right now. I will happily follow that up and get back to you and also advocate for exactly the thing that you are talking about in my correspondence with them as well.
Thank you very much, Matt. Councillor Kay.
Thank you. 2 questions, Chair. First of all, children appear in streets other than by schools. Do you agree that we should be pressing harder for 20-mile-an-hour limits in all residential roads?
Shall I take these one at a time, or?
Well, that's the first one.
That's the first one, yeah.
So 100%, absolutely. So 20 miles an hour should be the speed limit where there are people and vehicles in close proximity, because children sometimes run out into roads, and no amount of teaching the Green Cross Code is ever going to fully stop that. And so for those instances where children do run out into roads, increasing their chances of survival by 5 to 10 times by reducing that speed limit is a moral obligation on any adult who's behind the wheel, and particularly any adult who has any say in how roads are regulated or laid out.
Thank you. And picking up on Councillor Hyatt's point, school drop-off is a number one issue with most councillors. I feel that we need to be having a fundamental rethink on this. And I'm thinking specifically of the American system where they have dedicated drop-off areas so that children are not out in the streets. And secondly, they have staggered start times for lessons, so that not only moderates traffic flows, but it makes the provision of school bus services more practical, because they're needed for a longer period through the day.
I think there's some interesting suggestions, and I would completely agree with your analysis that this is a major problem. I lose count of the number of head teachers that I have spoken to in Birmingham in particular, who are literally tearing their hair out with anxiety as they do their second unpaid jobs as traffic wardens outside the school gates every single day. It's a completely unacceptable state of affairs that our educators, who already work so hard for so little financial reward, are forced to, have to be responsible for the safety of the kids as they leave the school as well. It's completely unacceptable. The approach we're taking through the kids' streets model doesn't specifically consider staggered drop-offs, but what it does is it takes inspiration from Paris, where the streets outside schools are fully pedestrianised, and in addition to that, gives consideration to the journeys that both adults and children might make around the neighbourhoods to make them more pleasant, less dangerous, and more enticing outside of a vehicle, essentially. But it's a place-building exercise that explores what happens when we reduce the number of vehicles, that we share our public space with. And I think you'd struggle to find anyone who would want more cars on our streets. But everything we do, kind of policy-wise and kind of infrastructure-wise, seems to lead to that end result. So yeah, the points you made are really interesting, and I will, we will consider anything, I guess, that will tackle the issue that you've raised, which I completely agree with. Through Kids Streets, this is a really big priority for us. We've got 3 projects underway, 2 in Birmingham, 1 in Coventry, to set forward iterative designs for what packages of interventions around schools should look like, in a sort of child-led way. And we are really hopeful of getting the resource together to help our local authority partners deliver them on a capital basis in the year ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to move on to your second part of your presentation.
Is that okay? I'm very aware that I've taken well beyond my allotted time, so apologies. I will just buzz.
The view from the room is that it's worth it.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you. Thank you. Okay, fine. I'll try and make the second bit worth it as well. So National Road Safety Strategy was launched at the beginning of this year. And what I'd like to do is just give a little bit of the context and overview of where that strategy evolved from, a quick rundown of some of the really exciting positive changes that are contained within it, and then my own spin on where it possibly could have been bolder or achieved more, and what we do to make that happen. So this strategy is the first of its kind nationally in over a decade. And it's no coincidence that between 2013 and 2023, the number of people killed and seriously injured on our roads, and just to remind everyone, behind each of those numbers is a grieving family, a community who's been torn apart, and people whose lives will never be the same again, in addition to the victims themselves. Those numbers essentially flatlined between 2013 and 2023. The numbers were pretty much identical over those 2 years. In 2013, the RAC produced a report that said, with the right policy and the right interventions, we could halve road deaths within the next decade. And so that opportunity, that missed opportunity, represents literally thousands of people whose lives could have been saved with the right interventions and the right focus. So the fact that this strategy has emerged at all is incredibly welcome. It sits within a broader international context of action on this issue. So the UN Decade of Action on Road Safety is this decade that we're currently in. And in 2025, the Marrakesh Declaration to focus efforts on tackling and specifically halving the number of children and young people in particular who are being killed on the roads was something the UK signed up to as well. Obviously, it sits within a background of rapidly evolving technologies, greater automation of vehicles, greater sort of intelligent tech on board vehicles, and real advances in vehicle safety, which has never been the rate limiting step in terms of protecting lives on the roads, because obviously within vehicle manufacturing there's an awful lot of money, and there's also an awful lot of money to be made by making stuff safer. So there's a clear market incentive for vehicle manufacturers to make their cars better. There's less of an incentive for policymakers and those who allocate resources to make the road safer, or not at least in the same way. What the road safety strategy does is it embeds the safe system within its thinking. And that's a really, really important move, because the safe system essentially accepts that individuals are fallible, but stipulates that systems can be perfectible. And that is the only approach we can really take to tackling public health crises such as the one that's unfolding on our roads. It identifies people who are particularly vulnerable on the roads. So talking, for instance, about the fact that 1 in 3 collisions are people at work, that the vulnerability of children, and also the fact that people in areas of social deprivation are 4 times as likely to be killed or seriously injured on the roads as those who are in more affluent places. Obviously, there's a humongous societal cost for KSIs. We cannot put a price on any individual human life, but we can count the costs of clearing up after these collisions and all the economic damage they inflict. Last year, that amounted, just in terms of lost economic output and cost to the NHS, so that excludes lots of other things, but that was £10 billion just on those 2 things in the last year. For our region, the cost of collisions that we accrue every year is £444 million. So that's an awful lot of safe crossings and planters and benches and mobility lanes for our children to travel around joyously and independently that we could be spending that money on. So the positive changes in the road safety strategy are the fact that it embeds the safe system into its thinking, that it takes an evidence-led approach, and a big part of what they've done is set up the Road Safety Investigation Branch, which is an independent body which will learn from collisions that take place, look for those patterns and commonalities as we've been talking about within the pedestrian deaths throughout the region, more in the first bit of the talk. And make recommendations to government and to other key stakeholders as to how best to tackle them. It incorporates new vehicular technologies. So there's about 18 new technologies that will be embedded into new vehicle production as a result of the road safety strategy. Most importantly, I think what the road safety strategy does is it creates targets. And this is kind of where we have the government by the short and curlies in terms of getting further resourcing to make this actually happen, because these are ambitious targets, make no mistake. 65%, 2/3 reduction in KSIs within the next 9 years is a really, really cracking target. And in specifically having a target for children is also very important, and that target is slightly higher, as you can see in that bullet point. The National Work-Related Road Safety Charter is a direct response to the fact that 1 in 3 of those collisions are taking place for people who are working. Hopefully that will do more to ensure that people who are driving for work are better rested and better equipped and better behaved behind the wheel as a result. And it will start impacting on the number of collisions that we're seeing for people who are out and about on their jobs. The targeted interventions that have been set forward by the road safety strategy are also really important. So they're looking in particular at younger drivers and older drivers. Both groups are massively overrepresented in the KSI statistics. So they have put in some caveats for those who are new to the roads. There's going to be these are all consultations that are ongoing, but the consultation is around a mandatory longer period of training for new drivers, regular eye tests for older drivers, and then also cracking down further on drink driving by reducing permissible alcohol levels while you drive. Obviously, the safest thing is not to drink at all. And also looking at how the police can be further empowered to remove people's licenses when they drink and drive, because often drunk drivers are taken to the police station and then back behind the wheel, sometimes before they've even sobered up, because their licenses are not taken away from them. It also includes, and this is thanks largely to the work of Sarah Coombs, the excellent Sandwell MP, measures to tackle ghost plates, which is a really, really significant issue on our roads. So these are plates that are undetectable by cameras or can be sort of rotated to give a false number plate as people drive through various speed protection assets. There's also a consultation which has just concluded on the new manual for streets. And what we're hoping is that this will set out an approach to our streets that makes them more about the people who live there than about the people who need to drive through. So creating that sense of people-centered design, of ownership of public space, and of the prioritization of the most vulnerable groups in those spaces, which will hopefully have a really good impact on our streetscape. Where could the road safety strategy have gone further? So I mentioned 20 miles an hour already. This is probably one of the best evidenced interventions that we have in terms of reducing KSIs. It was not grasped, the nettle was not grasped by the UK government, perhaps unsurprisingly, given the blowback that happened in Wales. But the flip side to that story is there's an awful lot of positives that have come out of Wales. I've mentioned the 100 KSIs that have been prevented, but there is also gradually, more and more acceptance of the 20 mile an hour norm. And driving behaviours have changed as well. So people are driving slower in Wales. And not only that, they're saving money on their insurance as well. An average of £50 a year in areas where 20 miles an hour has been rolled out, according to data from eShore. So there are lots and lots of positives to this story as well. The government chose not to go down that path. And so this puts the onus back on us at the regional and local level to do more to roll out this very evidence-based intervention. GDL in this bullet point, sorry for the acronym, stands for graduated driving licenses. So while the government did mandate sort of extra periods for young drivers in terms of their testing, it didn't implement full graduated driving licenses. So that's restrictions on nighttime driving on passengers, and a sort of gradual phased approach to being licensed to driving on the roads. This again has a huge amount of evidence behind it. There's meta-analyses of countries across the world. There is no country where graduated driving has been implemented that has not seen a statistically significant drop in death and serious injuries on their road network. So to my mind and to many other people's minds, this really was a trick missed, because there was a prioritization of convenience and freedom, or notional freedom, of often the very people, because young drivers are massively overrepresented in our statistics, the very people whose lives would be saved by this intervention. Thinking in particular of young people who've got their driving license for the first time, who take their friends out, and we've seen far too many collisions where we've had 4 or 5 young people wiped out in one terrible, fateful incident, which would be prevented or at least tackled by a proper graduated driving license system. I've put this bullet point in, the green one, just to give you an example of where the road safety strategy gets quite fluffy. They promised to collaborate with stakeholders to further understand safety concerns regarding increasing vehicle size. I'm not sure what there is particularly to understand about that. Perhaps the picture that I've included below could have summarised that point for them. There are an ever increasing number of SUVs on our streets, 8.2 million at the last count. If you parked them all at the same time, they would take up a space larger than the city of Manchester. And this is a growing problem of growing vehicles that shows no sign of abating. We need some quite powerful policy interventions that disincentivize the ownership of these vehicles, because it's a vicious circle whereby the better protected certain people are by having a bigger, heavier vehicle, the less protected other people outside of them are, and the more incentive there is to buy a vehicle that is bigger and more bullish. So that's something that we need to interrupt, not only for safety, but also for spatial considerations and pollution considerations as well. So for me, what the road safety strategy fails to do is give any consideration to how we interrupt the ever increasing number of vehicles on our streets. There has been a 12% rise in car ownership, in the number of vehicles, sorry, over the last 10 years. So there's 42 million vehicles on our roads now, and that trend shows no sign of abating. There is this hyper focus on electrical vehicles as though that is some sort of panacea, but that will do nothing to interrupt the problems we have with congestion and efficient use of space, particularly in urban areas, altogether. So there was an opportunity in this road safety strategy to have a conversation about how we reduce car ownership, because car ownership costs on average about £3,600 a year, and that's before you've even driven anywhere. And for many families, that financial burden, if it was replaced with alternatives that they could choose, they would gladly go for the alternatives. But the alternatives are either inefficient or unsafe or inaccessible for whatever reason. So if we'd had a strategy which really focused on how we make those alternatives more viable choices for people, then I think the road safety strategy could have gone a lot further. And most importantly of all, and this comes back to the point that Councillor Hyatt was making right at the beginning, this strategy is very broad in its ambition and scope, but it's not really backed by any funding. And if we're to improve the failing system that we have, where, as I said, children are subjected to acts of violence and sometimes lethal acts of violence by adults in machines in our public spaces, then we need some funding to fix it. That's a problem at local, regional and national level, and it's one that we should all strive to fix. That concludes my oh, sorry, I've got a concluding slide, but I think I probably just said it all. So that concludes everything. I'll shut up now because I've gone way over, and thank you very much for your time.
Councillor Hyatt.
Can I just say that this has been absolutely excellent. It's been superb. You know, I've gone to 20 AGMs, so, you know, loads of different things over the years, and you've summarised everything absolutely brilliantly. Thank you. There's a reason why you are our safety commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's really kind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, there are no other. Oh, Councillor Alden.
Thank you. It's just a comment, really. Absolutely agree in terms of we need to do all we can to promote improved ways of public transport. But just to put on the record, I don't agree with punitive measures. I think you should be offering the carrot, not the stick.
Okay, I suspected you might not have agreed with me, Councillor Alden, but that's fine. But can I just say that car ownership is massively subsidised in all kinds of ways. So these are conscious choices that we make at a policy level in terms of the resourcing that we give to different forms of transport. Recently, for instance, this government has given £600 million to electric vehicle subsidies that will be spent by people on these awful SUVs, which are out menacing our public spaces. And so, and that's about the same as they've spent for active travel across the whole country, just to give you an idea of the priorities that are at play here. So whilst someone said this to me on one of my first days in this job, there seems to be a disconnect between local authorities who want us to walk and cycle more and central government who want us to drive more. And I think that is a tension that needs resolving. Obviously, there are huge vested interests in the motor industry, and there are without doubt economic benefits that these big companies bring. But if we want to give people a realistic choice, then that balance of subsidies has to be shifted, because this isn't about punishing people. This is about taking away some of those subsidies for a form of transport that is causing all kinds of damage on our streets, to our atmosphere, to our health, and indeed to the spatial efficiency, particularly of our urban centres.
One comment from me to summarise, and this is a pet project, as it were, but I'm a great fan of getting cars off the road and putting them into free park and rides across the West Midlands, and encouraging them to get the train, get the metro, and hopefully at some point get the bus or get the sprint through park and rides. But you need the carrot approach for the park and rides in the West Midlands to continue to be free, to encourage and safe through CCTV cameras monitoring 24/7 through Parkmark and everything else like that. So it's a comment rather than a question. But given Chair's privilege, I thought I would raise that as we speak, because park and rides have been enormously successful in the West Midlands in getting people onto public transport by making them free and at convenient locations and sites. But to my mind, we need to do a lot more.
I would completely agree with that. I think, and for both what you and Councillor Alden have said, that's a very reasonable use of a carrot rather than a stick. There are only so many carrots to give out, of course, so that is something that we need to be mindful of. I'd just like to allay any suspicion that I am a dangerous car-hating hippie by saying I fully appreciate the advantages that this technology has brought us in all kinds of ways, and that the car has a very valuable and important role to play in connecting us in terms of economic activity. But technology is, inherently amoral. It just exists. It's how you apply that technology that society will either benefit or disbenefit from. To my mind, we have overused cars. We have over-relied on cars, and we have created a model of private car ownership which is dragging us down in all kinds of ways. So, private cars spend 93% of their time parked. If we have a more shared approach to car ownership, so things like car clubs are great. If we have things like road pricing, where the roads where people literally have no choice other than to use a car, so rural settings where they have to connect, those people shouldn't be taxed in the same way as people driving in urban centres are, but through excise duty and through fuel tax, the model that we currently have, they are. So that model should be replaced by a fairer sort of pricing system for the different types of road that people are using. There are ways that we can utilize the car to its maximum benefit and maximum advantage, but get rid of some of these harms that they are causing and some of the destruction that it is without a doubt bringing to people's lives across not only our region but the country more broadly.
Councillor Kay, I think, wants to come in as a...
Sorry.
I kind of got lost in the second part of this presentation. Cars deliver door-to-door transport on demand, and we're going to see Waymo automated taxis arriving probably in London later this year. Tesla have a more advanced system. The Chinese are producing fully autonomous vehicles or developing them. Sooner or later, the automated taxi is not only going to remove buses from our roads, but it will also mean that the advantages of owning a private car will diminish. And I just feel that your 65% target of reducing KSIs in 10 years is too modest. And I think that once we can remove the human factor from vehicles, we will be seeing a very radical reduction in road accident collisions. Thank you.
I think.
Yeah, sorry.
No, please continue.
No, sorry. I realise I'm taking up too much time, so that's fine if you need to wrap up.
Well, I was going to wrap up. I was going to say that's probably more of a comment and much broader than the road safety strategy. But so thank you very much indeed for
thanks for having me, guys. Thank you,
and for splitting it into those two sections. I thought that was very helpful, Matt.
Cheers, thanks.
So, and speak to you soon. Thank you.
Cheers, bye.
Right. So item 7, the strategic operations dashboard report. Kerry has been very patient. Thank you very much, Kerry.
Thank you.
Nice background.
Thank you. I was going to say good morning, but it's actually good afternoon now, isn't it, kind of thing. Chair, with your permission, I may be able to try and get you back a little bit on track by just picking out some of the key headlines. Would that assist you?
That would be helpful.
Yes, thank you. So what I'll do is I will refer to some of the headlines. I don't propose to cover road safety because I think Matt's covered that and Darren. But what I'll do is I'll pick out some of the headlines and I'll refer to the paragraph numbers so that attendees can follow. So Starting off with the executive summary, at 1.1, the latest data shows an increase in rail boardings. There were fall in patronage for ring and ride journeys, metro and bus. There's been a slight improvement in the performance of bus services between quarters 3, 24-25 and quarters 3, 25-26, with 75.3% and 76.3% of services operating on time, respectively. Paragraph 1.4, my area of business, the number of crimes on public transport per 100,000 journeys remains stable at 2.5 crimes per 100,000 journeys. And we'd have heard from Matt that reported road casualties have increased by 9.7%. Paragraph 2.2, bus patronage has declined during this period, largely due to the change in the national bus fare cap, which has resulted in an increase in single fares from £2 in December 2024 to £3 from January 2025. Paragraph 2.5, whilst overall network performance between the two periods remains relatively unchanged, journey times have increased due to increasing congestion and disruption on the bus network. Longer journey times for passengers make bus services less attractive and customers turn to alternative modes. Paragraph 2.8, total metro boardings has seen a reduction of 1.6% quarter 3 compared to this quarter last year. Paragraph 2.11, annualised rail boardings is showing a plus 3.7% increase in this quarter compared to last year. Paragraph 2.15, total West Midlands bus on demand journeys showing a reduction of 2.6%. Paragraph 2.18, total cycles parked at stations, 19.9% reduction compared to the same period last year. Paragraph 2.25, total West Midlands cycle hire journeys, I've covered that. Scooter journeys, which is at 2.27, showing a 14.1% increase. Paragraph 2.31, Transport Focus have published their latest research into passenger satisfaction on rail. We'll just highlight the overall satisfaction with West Midlands Rail, which is shown as 90%. Road safety, I think, has been covered by Matt and Darren. And just moving on to paragraph 2.5, just a bit more on passenger safety. Looking at a 3.4% increase compared to this time last year. 3.8% increase on the bus crime, but with a significant reduction in violent crime. That's a very whistle-stop tour, Chair, but I was just hoping to get you back on track. And if there's anything I can do to clarify anything, I will do my best. My specialist subject is crime and antisocial behaviour and all things passenger safety as part of Safer Travel Partnership.
No, thank you very much for that, Kerry. I'm going to start with Councillor Kay because I've finished with him twice, so I've started with him this time.
Thank you. It's just a quick comment to thank you for presenting the dashboard with previous year figures, which to some extent removes the seasonal variations that we've had to try and understand in previous versions of the report. Good decisions, good recommendations depend on good data. And I thank you for the clarity of this report and happy to pass on to others. Thank you.
Councillor Stanley.
Yeah, just one comment I mentioned to you earlier, Mr. Chairman, and that is I'm very, very disappointed to see the loss of patronage on the buses in particular. And one of the things that does concern me at this present moment in time is what's taking place currently in the Middle East with the extremely fuel price rises and also the cost of electricity. So the operators are going to find it very difficult in the future to cope with some of these loss of passengers on the seat. We've seen a big increase, as you mentioned, from £2 to £3 for a single journey. So, you know what I mean? It is a deterrent rather than an encouragement to use public transport. I'll finish at that.
Would any officer, and I noticed that Sandeep has just left the room, would any officer care to comment on that observation?
Apologies, I wasn't really paying attention.
I think there's
The likely
appreciate John.
increase in fuel prices is going to have an impact on the cost of the bus, cost of catching the bus.
Yeah.
And do Transport West Midlands have any thoughts on this one?
It is true, yeah. The cost of fuel will have an impact on operating costs, that's for sure. And certainly, as we move towards bus franchising, it's something we're very aware of and taking into account as we are sort of planning our approach to franchising. At the moment, we've obviously got the network being supported by the grant funding, and we're currently in negotiations around another round of that. But no doubt the cost of fuel will be foremost in operators' minds as part of that process as well.
I was going to raise, does that answer your question, Councillor?
Well, partly it does. I mean, I won't push it any further, but I am rather concerned about the loss of patronage on public transport in general. And these things clearly display today there is a loss there. And are we going to sort of do anything to help the operators? Like we used to use the BSIP money and stuff like that. Is anything like that in the future planned? I've no idea whether BSIP will be used or not.
Yeah, well, we're continuing to do many initiatives to help operators with patronage. So our BSIP patronage incentive scheme, marketing and branding as well as part of this transition franchising. So these will be, matters that we have a much greater financial interest in going forward. So absolutely, we will have various schemes and mechanisms in place to try and increase patronage.
And just picking up on that point, if we continue to lose 6% of patronage, does this have an impact on our business assumptions as part of bus franchising, which we've said as a committee we're very keen to have oversight on?
It will have an impact on how much revenue is coming in. We haven't done any specific modelling looking at this specific issue. Certainly, as we are developing our approach, we will need to take a view of what's affordable and be on the network accordingly.
I'm going to raise two issues. One, total ring and ride journeys. We've done that ring and ride review. All I would say, and I don't know if Councillor Hyatt would like to come in at any point, is that we said a 5-mile straight line distance requirement, but to look at cases on an exception basis over that 5 miles. What I'm hearing is we're adhering to a very strict 5-mile basis. So perhaps we could, which is what we weren't told at the time. So
I've just sent in an email about just that.
So perhaps,
especially in Coventry, I understand, but Wolverhampton is 7 miles by 7 miles. But there are going to be occasions when people will ask to go farther than the 5. We were told every step of the way that it would be looked at on a case-by-case basis, and that you knew your customers. So you knew if they were nipping off to the chip shop 8 miles away, and that would be a no, or going to see Aunt Ethel, who's ill in hospital, or going to the doctors that they'd always, been going to, which is slightly farther than 5 miles, and therefore say yes to. We're not quite hearing that on the ground.
Okay, well, feedback.
Thank you.
And one for you, Kerry, total cycles parked at stations. We have concerns, or perhaps there are concerns when the government stroke British Transport Police said they would no longer be investigating cycle theft from park and rides and stations unless it happened within 2 hours of the cycle being parked there. And very concerned, and I have read the narrative about a 20% reduction. I don't want to go into it in much detail other than I've had an email this morning from Better Streets for Birmingham about cycle, which I will forward if that's okay. As I said, I don't want to take the journey time up, but did you want to say anything about BTP and their national policy about investigation of crime?
Yes, members will be aware that we have significant investment in CCTV. Every month we are capturing 600 incidents and 47% of those are actually captured by my team in terms of active monitoring of CCTV and our connectivity with the police. So yeah, it is frustrating, especially given the significant investment that we have in support of active travel. So my stance is absolutely clear that actually where we spot individuals acting suspiciously in any of our cycle hubs, we contact the police. We have the ability to speak to them via police radio, and we also have the ability to be able to drop images live into their control room. So for me, if it's a crime in action, we will do that and we will communicate that with the police. And I'm frustrated, but clearly we're here to try and prevent and detect crime, and we're supporting the police in the delivery of that. Why wouldn't you take an active response to actually stopping criminals in their tracks?
So the message, just to be absolutely clear, in the West Midlands, at railway stations and other transport interchanges where you can park your cycle and we're covered by CCTV, they will continue to be investigated here in the West Midlands.
That would be a matter for the police, but in terms of our response, in terms of tackling and observing those cameras, we will do so based on the information and intelligence. So where we have active CCTV, we will continue to proactively monitor those locations for people who are about to commit crime.
Councillor Alden.
Yeah, thank you. Just on that point, because I completely agree with the chairman, it's unacceptable for them to say they won't investigate those crimes. I think the paper said at the time it was a suggestion that it was because of the length of time it takes them to go back through the CCTV. Obviously, I think we can make the point that you don't actually need to go back. You just jump to a halfway point each time whilst the bike's still there, and you can actually find when the bike was stolen within minutes. So we shouldn't let that be a reason for them not to investigate.
Exactly, and we are 24/7, 365. We actively support the police with their investigations. We will do the majority of that viewing, and we will narrow down the footage to literally, there you go, there's your snapshot, there's the bike before, there's the person stealing it. We'll put it into a secure evidence locker, and we can transfer it electronically across to the police.
Perfect, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillor Akhtar.
Yeah, Chair, I want to go back to Ring and Ride,
Yes.
please, because you were too quick.
Sorry. I apologise.
Yeah, it's a very serious issue in Coventry because we are providing a service to very vulnerable members of community. And thank you for taking or feeding back. But I think we need to do a bit more than that, than just feeding back, because these are very people who obviously need go to a hospital, to doctor's appointment, and for us a cap of 5 miles is not acceptable. And also I saw your email and I have read that email. I understand on the basis because we have lack of funding, but priority should be this, as I said, this very vulnerable group. We must meet their needs. Yes, funding is an issue, but at least whatever funding we have, the priority must be this group. And if they cannot go to hospital, I mean, I know we've been pointed out hospital transport, but you try getting that, no chance, not very difficult. So that's one issue regarding the 5 mile. And my understanding was that we were told that most of the operators of Ring and Ride or Bus on Demand, they know their customers and they will deal with that. It's not hard or fast rule. Now, second thing in Coventry is another issue, and that is everybody can use this Bus on Demand rather than just the vulnerable, which is different from rest of West Midlands Combined Authority. And I think that itself, I will ask our officers, that is nuts, because if we have this service open, which is subsidized by taxpayer for vulnerable people, then if everybody is using it, then the capacity obviously is limited. So that, as I said, priority should be given to very vulnerable people. And Chair, I think, we need to, this need to be sorted out very quickly. Either the review or whatever it is not acceptable.
Right, just to remind members, we did have a cross-party Ring and Ride task and finish group. from memory, Councillor Hyatt and Councillor McNicholas won it, and we said it made sense to put a 5 mile limit in, but for TFWM to look at over 5 miles on a case by case exception basis, if necessary, not for the 5 miles to be a hard and fast rule. That's my recollection, Councillor Hyatt, Councillor McNicholas.
Well, we to have a follow-up once the new ring and ride system had got going, so that we understood how it was progressing.
We were
and if
indeed
changes were needed.
we were indeed going to have a review, and I think that after the in the new municipal year, after the elections, I think that would be a good time to actually do that review. So if I can leave that with you, Sandeep, I'd be very grateful. But no, it's a very, very fair point, Councillor.
With your permission, then for the moment, I think officers should tell the operators that they should look at the case by case and see, especially that they're not going to fish and chip shop. They are going to attend hospital appointments and to attend GP appointments.
I think that's exactly what I've just asked.
Yeah, but no, that was fine. That review can take place, but
yes,
this message needs to go now from
and
Sandeep.
That's why I told Sandeep now.
Okay.
So Sandeep will, I am absolutely confident will action that request from members of this committee. Steve.
I've fed back these comments as well in real time to Kath Moore, who's our Ring and Ride, West Midlands Run service manager.
Yeah.
And Councillor Howard, he has received your email and apparently is responding as we speak. So
I met with you for few disabled people,
yeah,
right? And their anguish, we caused them, anguish, to be quite honest, with this scheme. And I want to bring it to your attention.
Well, I think this is why we set up a cross-party task and finish review group with senior members on it. But I absolutely take your points, Councillor Akhtar. Right. Any more questions on this item? No, in which case, thank you all very much. And thank you very much, Kerry, indeed, for the...
Thank you, everyone.
Right, I'm moving on to item agenda 8 then, which is the member engagement groups. First of all, I have received a nomination for Councillor Harbinder Singh to take over the Air Quality, Congestion and Environmental Impact MEG. Congratulations, Councillor Singh. And your first meeting is Wednesday, I believe. Wednesday, Jake? It is Wednesday, 11 o'clock? Jake will fill you in. Would any MEG champions like to say anything about? There's Councillor Hyde. I can always rely on you.
You definitely can, Chair, because I care. It's as simple as that.
I think all our MEG champions care, but
Okay,
you do.
I care and I'm passionate about things improving and getting better. I have a very serious question to ask, but my introduction to that links with road safety, because schools can have their own children to be active travel inspectors, and they produce a safety report of the roads around their area, and it costs about £175 for schools to take part. But that report, that authentic voice about road safety around their schools, goes back to the combined authority, which then looks to see if safety measures can be taken to improve the safety of roads around that area. It's a cracking scheme. Unfortunately, there's only one person running it, so it's it's limited to about 10 schools at the moment. But it's an absolutely cracking scheme that I would well recommend to any councillors. As would Workwise, which is a free transport to work before you get your wages if your wages are delayed, which is well worth sharing with your residents. I don't want to be the only councillor that is agreeing to this, so I really need the support of all you lot here. We were inspected about our active travel delivery, and whilst we got level 3, which is the level that we want to get in 2 aspects of it, for the actual delivery of active travel projects, we only got a level 2. Now I said, do we need a task and finish group then to explore the reasons why and to see how we can make sure that we get a 3 going forward. And I was told by officers that that's already in place, and that there are tight targets and timetables for improvement that they have to achieve. As a result of that, they said that they would prefer that we just got reporting back, at intervals. And I accepted that on the understanding that it's not just me making that decision, because at the time when this was done, unfortunately, there was only me there because we've got illness, of councillors that would normally attend the MEG, and you dipped in, didn't you? And then you had to dip out again. And so I think there's a decision to be made. We need to get to 3 for delivery for active travel projects. We know one thing that was delaying it. A random thing was Cycling UK dictating that all cycle lanes should be absolutely the top specification that it is possible to have. So, so some of the active travel projects had to be resubmitted again, because they'd done the most appropriate that they felt for the roads that they were on, rather than, absolute tip-top standard, which it had to be. So that accounted for some delays in delivery. But do we want to leave it to officers, because they have got their own task and finish group looking at ensuring that we get a level 3, because we need it? Because what they've said is, we're not going to give you quite as much money now. You're going to have to find money for active travel projects from other pots. So we've already suffered as a consequence. And if our level becomes a 2, we will get less money again. So it is vital that we get to a 3 in delivery. We've got 12 months to do it. Do we want to have a report back, or do we want to jump in, or do we want to have a report back and then make the decision about whether we should have a task and finish? Because it's the officers one is in place. They are as keen as we are to get to that level 3 and have it, because they want the money, because they've got the vision and the passion to make projects happen. Or what do we want to do? I don't want that sole decision.
Can I make a suggestion, Councillor Hyatt, in that in the new municipal year, we're looking at what we need to do in further tasks and finish. We've had the ring and ride, I referred to it earlier. We've got several later on in the agenda. I don't think there's going to be any appetite to do a task and finish between now and the local elections.
Yeah, certainly not.
No, we meet in May after the local elections, but before the board meeting. So I think this is something we could put on the agenda, looking at what task and finish things as a committee we might want to look at and to make a decision. And I think that's a very good suggestion. So can I put that forward?
Yes, I it's really important, and our officers are as committed as we are. So we might want to have that first report about how things are progressing before we do anything, or the report might be so glowing and wonderful that we actually don't want to. It's a value judgment, isn't it?
And that's why I say have it for consideration, along with other suggestions people may have in terms of task and finish groups, noting the capacity both of us as members and as officers as well. So if I put that forward for the agenda for the May meeting, Lindsay, anyone else want to comment on MEGs?
Oh, can I flag up as well that I was only allowed to have a 1.5 hour MEG. Not once has that been enough, because officers are passionate and share, and it's brilliant MEG, active travel and sustainable transport is. So I'm just flagging up for future consideration. Maybe all MEGs should be 2 hours.
I've got no views one way or another. That's, I think, for MEG champions to discuss with officers. But if you feel that you need 2 hours, I would speak to your lead officer and say you would like it for 2 hours. Councillor Auden and Councillor Stanley.
Thank you. Just to pick up a couple of things on the Rail Metro and Sprint MEG for people's attention. So obviously the Coventry Very Light Rail pilot, which the members in Coventry will know lots about, has been going successful, and they're expanding to do an additional bit in the new year. I think that's something that the new, after the elections, iteration of this committee will want to keep a close eye on. I think there's a lot of potential there. The other thing I really just wanted to raise, the committee will be doing some work looking at the impact of the Rosewell review. Now that's been through board. If anyone has anything specific from their area they want being picked up, so that do just feed in. But there is a number of metro and rapid transport schemes that need to happen over the next couple of years, or scheduled to happen. I think there is going to be a need for this main committee to have a look at that as well, because pretty much every scheme so far that goes through runs into delays. And if we're going to get out of that cycle and make sure these ones, particularly if you think about a couple of the football related ones, so the improvements to Aston and Whiston Station in time championships, and then for the Blues ground opening, having their new metro line in place, they need to run to time. So I think this committee should have a look at that in the new year to make sure that we are keeping these all to time. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you, Councillor Alden. Councillor Stanley.
Yes, mine's a different situation altogether. I attend my megs that you put me on, but the attendance at megs is very poor. To be perfectly truthful, I think the last one, Councillor Kay, was just me and you, wasn't it? Thank you. So just make the point that, you know what I mean, they're there for a purpose, but they're not being used by the members.
And that's why I've asked Pete Bond to come back with a MEG paper in May, in terms of looking at it, how they've been operating, refreshing, and whether we could actually do it better, and possibly, where necessary, inviting members from the other scrutiny committee onto it, recognising transport is not in isolation. I notice Dan has a booklet which says growth for everyone, and said growth in the context of transport. So where appropriate, because if we're trying to link up housing growth, or we're trying to link up growth in unemployment, people need public transport from their new homes or to new employment activities. Councillor Hyatt.
I think it's an excellent suggestion, and that you do need joined up thinking. We need partnership working, you know, within and without. Most definitely. I think that teamwork brings success. I just need to flag up though that just as our Labour delegation is a bit low, we have been hit by councillors that are no longer Labour councillors, and we have been hit by significant illness on our side. So please don't judge the situation that we're in at the moment as typical. Please look at earlier numbers, because just at this moment on the Labour benches, it's not really the norm.
Okay,
thank you.
Noted, Councillor Hyatt. If there's no other comment, shall we go on to item agenda? Sorry, Joe.
Can I just add something to the finance and performance, Meg?
Yes.
We agreed at the meeting in February that finance will restore the regular financial monitoring report that previously came to the committee, because that's not been over the last 12 months, that's not been happening. And that's something that we discussed at the meeting as well, so that members are able to scrutinise the finances in the most appropriate way.
And Claire Nye is on board with this. Excellent. That's really good to know. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you. And once again,
quickly, because that financial report, as you know, consists of a revenue, budget and capital.
Indeed.
Essential.
And once again, I'd like to thank all the MEG scrutiny champions for the hard work they actually do. Right, I am going to now move on to item agenda 9, which is the task and finish on zero emission buses for regional areas. There is a private report. I'm going to try not to mention the private report and keep it all in the public. Should members wish to raise something from the private report, please do flag it up. I don't want to stifle debate, but I think we can have a discussion without referencing the private report. Unfortunately, Councillor Nines, who is the chair of this task and finish, can't be here today for personal reasons. But again, I thought it was a really good task and finish, looking at why we handed back 13.2 million to the government from the funds originally agreed from SEPRA. I think we went to it in great detail. I really would like to thank Steve for all his hard work in terms of helping this task and finish group, and of course all the other members on the task and finish group, Councillor Hyatt and Councillor Nicholas. And what I particularly liked is that we did a lessons learned summary, which is in the private report, which I think will be helpful for future grant allocation funding and what we need to do beforehand and what we need to do during the process. But also, if we don't get what we consider to be the correct decision, in terms of pushing back further, and saying, look, do you really want to do this? Because, you know, there are other possibilities as to what could actually be done rather than accepting the final decision. Because at the end of the day, if we push back and they still say no, then we haven't lost anything. But you never know, you might convert a no to a yes or a partial yes. That's all I was going to say. I don't know if any other members would like to make a comment on it. And I've asked Lindsay and Dan for the process once we approve the separate task and finish report. I believe it's going to be submitted to the mayor.
Yes, Chair. So in respect to the recommendations, so the report along with the lessons learnt report will be shared with the mayor and Sandeep as Exec Director for TFWM and also the DFT.
So are we, sorry, Councillor Hyde.
Well, I can say, I don't know if from the report you can see that actually our officers did extremely well in the situation that they were in. If this is no reflection on the officers other than to say that they did extremely well in the situation in which they were placed. And we wouldn't have had the money for the electric buses that we were able to transfer some of that funding to if this process hadn't taken place. So overall, although we ended up handing money back, it was a net gain for the authority. And that, you know, I'm not sure you blew your own trumpet enough, really. Throughout the whole of it, yes. I'm not sure, because actually they did do very well in the circumstances in which, you know, they had to operate. It's as simple as that.
Thank you very much indeed for those comments, Councillor Hyde. Councillor Kay.
Yeah. The lessons learned are in the private report, and I've just got one comment, which I don't think is particularly private matter, and it is on the question that the business case clearly failed to identify the technology problems with introducing this service. And in my view, the business case failed in that respect. And I think that we should actually, when considering lessons learned, find out why we didn't pick this issue up further before so much money was spent. Thank you.
So we can, so yes, you're right, we can discuss that matter. By the way, the reason some of it's in the private is because there's some commercially sensitive figures in there relating to National Express's role in the project. I think we did pick up the risks around the technology actually in the business case, and indeed when we took the initial report right up to the Combined Authority Board, those risks were flagged pretty clearly around the technology risk. And actually technology, good technology, works, but it's more the commercial risks actually. National Express were of the view that their approach to the project would enable those to be managed by some of the relationships they built and some of the providers proposing to use. But it became clear during the subsequent 12-18 months that those risks weren't going in the right direction. In fact, they were coming to pass as we feared they might do. And then once National Express had a change of senior management, the new management team took a very different view of the project, more akin to what our original risk profile showed. So I think those risks were highlighted, but we weren't able to manage them.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the committee to agree the recommendations as set out in agenda item 9. Are we agreed?
I agree.
Cool, thank you very much. So moving on to item 10, the work programme. We have set out the work programme both for this committee, but also the forward plan for the WMCA. In terms of the WMCA forward plan, the only transport-related item on the agenda for the board is the Sprint purchase, which is ironically the money has come from federal funding, if I remember correctly.
Not all of it, no. There's a contribution.
There's a contribution.
The bulk of it comes from CRSTS program.
Right. Okay. Because I'm just looking at 2.2 on page 50, which says 24 Sprint vehicles. But never mind. Okay. So that is what's going to board on Friday, and this is for the services between Walsall and Solihull. Is there anything more you want to say on it? But before I ask you to do that, I believe Councillor Alden has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Question about the details of that purchase. And obviously it's a decision for the board. So I guess this is really, we should be directing or asking the board to make sure they have considered this. And that is that the size of the buses we're proposing to purchase do actually fit around all of the junctions and road space that the routes are proposed. I know in Birmingham in the past we've had issues when vehicles have been bought by the council that were in fact the wrong size for the spaces they had to go in. And obviously that would be a disaster if that happened here. So now is the time before we sign contracts to make sure that we are certain. And I would suggest that because the plan is to have more than one sprint route, we should be making sure that all the proposed sprint routes, the sizes of these vehicles can get down. Presumably once there's multiple routes, the idea won't be that one bus will specifically always stay on one route. So I just ask that we make sure that is considered by the board.
Absolutely. It's one of the fundamental bits around the sprint standards and the sprint design parameters when the corridors were originally looked at, not just the ones that we've delivered already, but any future routes, is very initial work done around tracking of vehicles to ensure that this length of vehicle can actually work within the highway infrastructure that we have, and alongside that, the highway infrastructure improvements that are being made as well are designed to accommodate accordingly. As you may be aware, Councillor Alden, we had some conversations many years ago about the slightly longer vehicles that would have needed derogation from government because they would not be classified to operate on UK roads. We have stepped back from that position for the needs of being practical in terms of how they move. Also, and I know there is history with articulated vehicles in the past, the whole notion of sprint was not to use these into smaller estate roads and things like that. So serving the key corridors and thinking about feeder routes that link into the network. But yeah, absolutely a key part of the design parameters.
Can we just make sure that's raised at the board?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on item agenda 10? Anyone would
Yes,
like
if
to
I could just briefly say that I think we really should be now looking seriously at the item referred to real-time information. It's started to adhere to. It's a bit of a shambles of a mess at the moment. You stand there, it's just 18 minutes to the bus, and then it comes due, and then due drops off and tells you next time it comes, so you've got to keep waiting there. Now, if you compare this to what we get on a railway station is very positive. It gives you the day on the train, all the times, exactly what's going on, well informed. But to be perfectly truthful, this real-time information, one time we're having two operators running it. I don't know what the current situation is, but it is a shambolic mess at the moment because it's not accurate at all. And people are just saying, well, if they're going to run the bus, it's better to put up cancel so we know, rather than keep standing in the cold and the rain waiting for one, but they ain't going to turn up.
Well, before you say anything, we've had ghost plates from the road safety. Yep. These are ghost buses. We are due to have a report as TDOS on the 18th of May on them. So thank you for the advance comments, and whoever is doing those, Denise Thompson, whoever is doing this report, if they could be aware of Councillor Stanley's comments.
If I may, Chair, absolutely, get the points there, Councillor Stanley, and real-time information should just be that. When we do have system issues with the systems, the data feeds don't come through from the vehicles. Every vehicle is fitted with an automatic vehicle location kit. Now, there are sometimes, more often than not, breakdowns in communication for those various systems. And what happens is it reverts back to the timetable times, which is when it says due, but nothing arrives. So I'm sure when Denise brings that paper, there will be talking about one, where the system is currently, where we know there are inadequacies in the system, and what are we doing around working with operators on making sure we get greater reliability for the number of vehicles that are actually responding with the real-time information rather than timetable time.
Yeah, we have got one, I better not mention names, I've mentioned meetings before, one operator that he causes breakdown very, very regular on a very regular occasions, and they are disasters to us for the West Midlands. But the operator, all I'm prepared to say is it begins with a D, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Stanley. Councillor Crowley.
Is this any other business?
Well, there's no any other business, but what do you want to say, Councillor Crowley?
Thank you. Thank you. It will be probably my last meeting because I will be leaving, as you mentioned earlier on. The load
well, not technically. Not technically. I'll come to that in a second because the next meeting is before the council AGM.
Right.
So as long as you're re-elected, you will be asked to attend on Monday, the 18th of May.
Okay, all right.
We're not going to let you off.
Corrects me like that.
Oh, does it? All right, that's fine. That's fine.
We will see you again.
All right,
No,
thank you. Thank you. I was going to thank everybody, but I will think.
Hopefully, yes. So I don't have to deal with item 11 because we're not excluding the public and press. We're not going to discuss. We've discussed the private report, item 12, in the context of item 9. So Councillor Chowdhury's comments are very apposite because the next meeting is on Monday, the 18th of May. This is before, I believe, all the local authority AGMs. So we are still in the same municipal year. So as long as you are re-elected or remain a councillor, you are still part of this committee and are on the invitation list for Monday, the 18th of May. So I think I did a nose count. I think 3 members of the 20 are not standing for re-election. So that means 17 are. Some are standing down. Some aren't. So I hope to see as many of you as possible, assuming that I'm re-elected. So that's at the whim of the electorate of Hall Green South on Monday, the 18th of May, 2026. And I wish you, those who are re-standing, the very best of luck and joy with your campaigns.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and that concludes this meeting of EDOSC. But just to remind you, we'll have a 15-minute break and then we will go into the briefing, which I think Sandeep is going to lead on the Rosewell review. So,
And that will be in this room.
That will be in this room. So thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.
If you
have
are,
your dinner now.
if